It's Christmas of 2020, and the sound of 1,000 Mariah Careys wafts in the air. A while has passed since the pandemic set the world on fire, and I casually find myself replaying Code Vein, a game that I thought was decent but had its share of frustrations of the get good variety. In the space of a week, I find myself beating it to 100% completion, starting a script for a video, and believing it to be one of the best games I have played in years. What the balls happened? Developed by Shift of God Eater fame, Code Vein is an action RPG, a Souls-like kind of game, but with an anime aesthetic and a fashion sense that aged like wine. It's unapologetically dark and corny, but behind its veil of tropes is a story about self-sacrifice, human nature, and a YouTuber who overanalyzes everything. Welcome to the Ramble Zone. This video was supposed to have been out on April Fool's, the perfect day to be 100% unhinged while still having plausible deniability. That's because, as you might have guessed from the title, there's more to this video than simply talking about the funny rice ball game. So grab your pitchforks and let's get stabbing! In Code Vein, the world as we knew it was ruined by a calamity called the Great Collapse. The thorns of judgment rose from the ground, leveling entire cities and splitting the earth apart. Countless lives were lost, and dangerous monsters were unleashed into the world. With the creation of revenants, these monsters were pushed back. However, revenants suffer from extreme bloodthirst, and will transform into mindless abominations if left untreated for too long. Project Queen attempted to create a second generation of revenants without that problem, but the test subject went bananas and had to be forcibly put down by an army led by a man named Gregorio Silva. After the War of the Queen ended, a mysterious red mist surrounded the area, cutting off all external contact and trapping the survivors inside. Silva established a professional government to try and maintain order, and soon a miraculous source of blood was found, the Blood Springs. And thus the Society of Vein was established. Revenants are ordered to find blood springs and bring their fruit to the government, while the few surviving humans are taken to shelters, where they are safe from danger in exchange for providing their blood. The game itself begins shortly after these events. You awaken in the middle of a ruined city, and a scantily dressed girl points you towards a nearby blood spring. By spilling your blood, the tree is revived and starts producing blood beads, which serve to satiate a revenant's thirst. But this is the post-apocalypse and a bunch of slavers are looking for someone to do their work for them. You're forced to put your butt on the line in order to search for more blood beads together with Oliver, a kind revenant who is also stuck in this mess. Midway through the place, however, he is attacked by a lost and incapacitated. Oliver assures you he'll be fine and prompts you to go on by yourself so you can help the girl. At the end of the path, you find the slavers at the feet of a rampaging Oliver, who is most definitely not fine after inhaling too much miasma. You have no choice but to bonk him in the head a few times until he goes down, and under his ashes is a spiky crystal, tempting you to touch it and rub it and ow! A flash of light transports you to an odd dimension, where fragments of Oliver's memories play out. Somehow you have the ability to calm down these crystals and inherit the blood codes of their owners. This catches the attention of Louis, a revenant who is searching for a way to end the bloodthirst. He finds the sudden appearance of the blood springs rather suspicious, and the roots have to come from somewhere, right? Because of your unusual powers, he believes that you could be the key to finding a cure, and so you join his group. Plus, unlike those slavers, Louis would never stab you in the back. The world is a dumpster, and we've got totally not vampires roaming around. What a mess. Revenants are born from corpses implanted with a biological organ regenerative parasite, granting the ability to survive fatal injuries by dispersing into particles and then reconjoining at a safe location. As long as the parasite isn't destroyed, they are effectively immortal. It's a miracle of medicine. You gain superpowers and you can cheat death as many times as necessary. Congratulations, you've been cursed with awesome. Now go fight an army of man-eating monsters with your merry band of friends. In reality, Revenants weren't seen as heroes. They were the perfect cannon fodder, reviving and dying on the front lines as many times as necessary. But they still feel pain, they still feel tired, and they still feel human emotions. No matter how many times you get maimed, the fear of knowing you're about to suffer a nice, juicy death at the hands of some monstrosity remains just as strong. And each death drains them of their humanity, losing memories of their life, their friends, and their family. This leaves behind a vestige, containing the victims' lost memories and driving other revenants insane. Their thirst for human blood also puts them in danger of losing control and having the parasite take over completely. Those who succumb are called lost, spreading a dangerous miasma wherever they go and mutating into abominations, like what happened to poor Oliver. The ultimate irony is that the lost have achieved true immortality, because they cannot be permanently destroyed. In the context of gameplay, this is why enemies respawn. In the context of the story, this means that the creation of Revenants sped up the doomsday clock, for with every new lost, the world gets just a bit more dangerous. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You might be thinking, damn, those idiots screwed it all up for everyone. But the fact of the matter is that Revenants were a desperate and necessary measure, since the horrors were all but impervious to normal weaponry. It was either Revenants or humanity getting turned into friskies. The theme of making hard decisions is the leading arc behind Silva, who is initially framed as an evil dictator, but after the midpoint it becomes apparent that he did what he had to, because nobody else was willing to make the hard decisions required to instill some level of order in a fractured society. The world was falling apart, Revenants suffered from bloodthirst, and Darwin's law was in full effect. Revenants fought each other for blood beads, and the last few humans were generally treated like cattle. One such case appears early on, a woman who was so broken and tired of being treated as a walking blood bag that she would rather kill herself. Avoiding situations like this is why Silva created the blood bead tax, in which Revenants are forced to give away an essential survival supply or risk punishment and maybe even permanent death. He also assured that humans were safeguarded at shelters, where they provide a regular donation of blood in exchange for protection from the dangers outside, #NotAllRevenants. There were no right choices, but this gave humanity a chance to rise up again. Unfortunately, many blood springs started to dry up, and the worsening situation indirectly led to slavery, where the strong sit back and reap the rewards, while the weak do the dirty work. Just like real life, huh? Throw in the mad scientist and we have some spicy social commentary right there. But where does the rice ball fit into all this? Well, there's this scene where one of the partner characters mentions that Revenants don't need food, but some still eat, maybe out of habit or as a way to cope with their loss of humanity. Taken out of context, it's easy to make fun of this scene. I mean, it's just dumb anime schlock, am I right? Damn, the waifu sauce was a mistake. Explain yourselves, weebs. In context, the scene works, because this is a character that the player gets to know over the course of the game, and it conveys one of the basic struggles of being a revenant. Nothing about the story or the characters is particularly original or well written. In fact, I'd argue that the game does a terrible job at explaining the backstory and makes it unnecessarily confusing even though the official site summarizes all of that stuff succinctly. But simplified to its most basic form, Code Vein is about how people have to stand together in the face of adversity, and you're the chosen one who is going to make things right. This is emphasized in gameplay. You have the option to go at it alone, but the game expects you to take a partner with you. They all have a unique communal gift, and everyone has an ability that lets them sacrifice some of their own HP to heal you, or vice versa. Joining you is the young man with a strong resolve and a troubled past. The veteran who fights for his friends, the prickly ice queen who melts after a couple of cutscenes, the jackass with a heart of gold, the damaged lady who would do anything for her loved one, and the sweetheart with high-caliber ballistics. No wonder everyone is thirsty. You can reduce all of these to stereotypes, but just because you can assign a label to them doesn't mean they don't have a story to tell. As a whole, Code Vein conveys its message and ideas well, and for me, subjectively, that might be the most meaningful part of a video game story. Analyzing stories is hard for a multitude of reasons, and one of them is that what I look for in a story isn't the greatest prose or the most complex themes. That's just a bonus I can appreciate. I like how stories like these can take place in the grim darkest of worlds, yet not fall into the trap of coming off as a bundle of misery that becomes exhausting after a while. There's always someone trying to make the best of the situation, or looking at things from a positive angle, even if predictably at least someone will have to sacrifice themselves in the end. For a game so determined to kill you, it sure likes being encouraging, putting in a good word for every small victory. It's the kind of energy that gives me some hope that when a disaster of this degree occurs in the real world, mankind will recover instead of devolving into people killing each other until we are all dead. One thing is a story moment actually being stupid nonsense. Another thing is looking dumb on the surface, but being supercharged with emotion on the inside. There's this trend with certain clicks where the reviewer goes into certain pieces of media with preconceived notions, as if they had to dunk on a game to preserve their cool gamer card. I think the reason why this ticks me off is because it shows a lack of willingness to engage with the game, and I've come to believe that you can tell when a developer is being genuine. You know that game, Forspoken? A while back, it sparked a discussion about the way characters are written, and someone made a counterpoint using a scene from Kingdom Hearts. Admittedly, I haven't actually played Kingdom Hearts, but I am aware of its reputation for being power of friendship cringe, as some detractors would put it. A third person then pointed out that audiences are so used to constant snark and sarcasm that this scene showing a heartfelt moment between two friends is now seen as cringe and childish. That might have been the best roast I've read all year. A clumsy delivery likely has to do with a lack of time, money or experience combined with meddling from the penny pinchers up top. Not because the devs decided one day to make it dumb or cringy on purpose. Well, unless you're Coffee Stain Studios or Running with Scissors. Besides, I'm pretty sure that a lot of writers are perfectly aware that plot holes or inconsistencies that they didn't consider will be inevitable. Incidentally, this also applies to people who write scripts for YouTube videos. The overwhelming majority of stories fall apart the moment you stop to ponder for a while, because it's impossible to account for everything. And when it comes to video game development, the more alternative possibilities you account for, the more you chip away at time and budget. It simply isn't feasible from a practical standpoint. Hell, I bet that some writers look at themselves writing the schwockiest thing imaginable and just rolling with it. It's important to know how to have fun with what you're doing, and that goes for the player side too. Look, some games are easy to make fun of, and despite jerking myself over here, I am also a turbo hypocrite guilty of doing it. It's been 5.5 years of YouTube, and I've been down that road in my trashy attempts at comedy. But I've learned that I'd rather be able to laugh with it rather than laugh at it. To accept it for what it is trying to say instead of deriding it for not being worthy of a Nobel Prize. For not being something it isn't trying to be. And as the saying goes, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Don't misunderstand. Objective criticism is important and is always part of what I do. It's especially important when you're talking about a full-priced commercial product that people spend their hard-earned money on, and boy, we'll get to that bollocks later. Over the years, I've realized that what I am most interested in doing with my videos isn't to merely say that X game is good or X game is bad, but rather to introduce people to my own subjective experience. To share the things I felt when I played them funky video games. Video games are different from mediums like books, which have little more than text. Video games have visual elements, audio elements, and uniquely interactive elements that can and should be used to communicate ideas with more than just words. Together, those elements make the whole package, and when one of them stumbles, the others can pick up the slack. I don't talk about soundtracks in depth, but they are a big part of video games for me, and the right track can elevate an otherwise average scene into something with tremendous emotional impact. The Memory Echoes have this amazing track with different variants that dynamically change depending on the scene, and by itself makes them that much more powerful despite being an obvious way to reduce time and budget spent animating stuff. Kind of like characters not even having animated mouths outside of cutscenes. Sure is convenient that everyone is wearing masks, huh? Music is also amazing because you can carry it elsewhere. You can listen to it when doing other things, and it will spark memories of times past. Good music can carry good memories. Though I am naturally attuned to this way of thinking, since I make videos for YouTube and use background music to help deliver the intended effect of what I'm saying. Maybe some people think this is emotional manipulation, because it's basically a cue telling you to feel a certain way. But as long as it works, those interactive elements can also build a connection to the character you play as, which in Code Vein's case is fully customizable. I find these systems fascinating because everyone looks at them differently. Some attempt to recreate themselves. Some use it for funnies by creating the ugliest abominations possible. Some try recreating famous people or their favorite characters, almost as a sort of fan fiction. When it's a game that I am very into, I tend to get attached to the characters I create. It's something that I've toyed with as a potential video idea, a strange phenomenon in which a blank slate protagonist can become more than just that. Having run through the game multiple times with the same avatar, I have become familiar with his internal struggles. In my thoughts, I start imagining his backstory, the way he feels about stuff, etc. Of course, that's not what the player avatar actually is. That's just my imagination projecting my wacky ideas onto him. He doesn't have much character to speak of. He barely makes any decisions, and the ones he does are those that you would expect. He's the good guy. Of course he's going to help his companions at any cost. And it's curious how a difficult game can transcend gameplay and have an active role in how the story is perceived. If the game was too easy, the player's immersion would break. What difficult journey would it be if I was deleting every boss without breaking a sweat? The avatar is struggling because I am struggling. His failures and successes are my own. This helps me become invested in his efforts to protect his friends and save the world. And he becomes more than just the anime pretty boy that makes something awesome happen when I press a button. That's probably why seeing him suddenly blurt out voiced lines at the end is such a cool moment. I am no longer playing just to see the credits roll. I am playing so that this stupid dork can have his happy ending. Speaking of playing, we're almost halfway through and I still haven't touched on the gameplay. The world is split into multiple interconnected areas, and the basic goal is to get to the next objective. But that isn't as straightforward as it sounds. The game doesn't have your typical puzzles. At most, it just requires you finding a key to unlock something. It's more accurate to say that exploration itself is the puzzle. Every zone is filled with multiple paths, some that are dead ends, some that have treasure, and some that take you all over the place. There are also many points where you can open a door or drop down a ladder to unlock a shortcut to the nearest missile, where you can heal yourself and restore your healing charges. Enemy placement is designed to punish carelessness, and facing more than one or two enemies at once is a recipe for disaster. Enemies with ranged attacks will be covering dudes with big hammers, and sneaky boys will be hiding behind corners or in the ceiling. But the somewhat open-ended layouts provide ample opportunities for taking the initiative before enemies notice, or to bait one of them away from the group or outright killing them with a strong ranged attack. Every enemy slain awards you with haze, a multi-purpose currency that serves not only to level up the player character, but also to buy items and upgrade equipment. However, the feat causes you to drop all of your haze wherever you died, and you can only get it back by returning to that location and picking it up. If you die a second time on the way there, that haze is gone for good. If you've played a Souls-like before, a lot of this should be familiar. What makes Code Vein stand out is the blood codes, which you can think of as a class system. Each one is geared towards certain playstyles, with different stats and gifts, which are the game's active and passive skills. The game doesn't use numbers for stats like strength and dexterity. Instead, every blood code has rankings that influence how well your equipment and gifts will scale. For example, a weapon with a strength scaling of A will inflict more damage when equipped on a code with a strength rank of A than on one with B. Where it gets really spicy is when you start mastering individual gifts, unlocking them for use with any blood code. Almost all of them can be mastered, and there's a ton of variety, ranging from simple stat buffs and elemental magic to some with very specific effects. From this freedom emerges a nearly endless amount of builds. You have 4 slots to place passive gifts, which are always enabled, and 8 slots for active gifts that require spending Ichor. You recover it by hitting enemies, and the default maximum depends on your blood code. You can raise this limit temporarily by performing drain attacks, but it will reset when you die or rest at a missile. On the equipment side, you have two parts to consider. The first one is weapons, spread through 5 types that share the basic framework of light and heavy attacks. They are balanced around being roughly on the same power level, but each individual weapon has its own quirks and properties. They have different movesets and stat scaling, and some even have special attacks that require spending Ichor. All of them can also be upgraded up to +10, with each grade increasing their attack power. One-handed swords offer a balance between weight, speed and damage, perfect for keeping on the move while wearing enemies down. Great swords are physical powerhouses. They are slow and heavy, but deal high damage, and their high defense stats lets them face tank damage when blocking. For the educated caveman in all of us, hammers have the highest base damage, but this comes at the expense of being painfully slow. Polearms are built for crowd control, with wide sweeping attacks that can strike multiple foes at once. Finally, bayonets are fast, lightweight, and feature built-in ranged attacks that spend Ichor. The downside is that they have the weakest defense stats, so blocking with them isn't very reliable. Then you have blood veils, serving as your armor. Each veil reduces damage from different sources by a percentage, and like with weapons, they are designed to be all on the same power level. Each of the 4 types also change your parry and your drain attacks. Ogre and Hound types have fast attacks, and their parry window starts almost immediately. Taste Menopause! Meanwhile, Stinger and Ivy types have a small delay, but a larger parry window, and the attacks themselves have longer range. Ivy types in particular have a useful charge attack that can be controlled and used to sucker punch enemies. Veils also enhance the power of different gifts, split into light and dark categories. Upgrading them will increase that bonus, together with the power of their drain attacks. Picking the right combination of all of these elements is extremely important due to the weight system. While it is part RPG, Code Vein's combat is primarily driven by action rather than numbers. Every code has a weight limit, and the total weight of your weapon and veil decide which mobility class you get. Quick gives you the cool sidestep, normal gives you a roll, and slow gives you the fat roll. The hardest part is managing your stamina, because almost everything you do expends it. Swinging your weapon, dodging and blocking all drain it, and finding yourself in front of an enemy without any stamina is cruising for a bruising. Healing is limited and enemies hit hard, so even the heaviest armor won't protect you for long. You need to learn their attack patterns and exploit the balls out of your invincibility frames. It's very much a game where you don't want to get hit, and it rewards well-timed dodges with the focus mechanic, which makes it easier to stagger enemies and is required for certain passive gifts to activate. All you can do to increase a veil's defenses is to apply the fortification effect, which slightly boosts the damage reduction but increases weight. It's all a trade-off. So it sure would be a shame if Bamco decided to nuke that balance with pre-order bollocks, wouldn't it? Someone decided to have what is arguably the best 'veil in the game be obtainable within the first 30 minutes. The Venus Claw was originally a pre-order bonus and later made available to everyone, but the damage was already done. It has a high gift bonus, high drain attack damage, low stat requirements, and most importantly is significantly lighter than the vast majority of Blood Veils, granting you superior mobility for many weapons that conveniently are just a tad too heavy with most other veils. The only alternatives on the same weight class are the Noble Silver and the Ivory Grace, both of which are found late in the story. Quick mobility is a lifesaver for one-handed swords, and there's a very useful passive gift called Swift Destruction, which increases all of your damage depending on your mobility stat. Slow grants nothing, normal grants 10%, and quick grants you a significant 20% damage boost. The Venus Claw only has one flaw, and that is its low defenses. But again, the best defense is to simply not get hit. Defense-focused veils in general just aren't very good, remarkably so late game, and most definitely on New Game Plus, where enemies get large increases to attack power. You take too much damage for a raw tank build to be viable without specific gifts that are useful with every Blood Veil anyway. I have similarly shaky opinions on the Zweihander, a great sword found early in the game that is just all around excellent and will carry you through the entire game. It is good that even early weapons can be perfectly usable or even excellent, no matter at which point of the game you are. Even the Unga Bunga pipe you start with has its purpose, due to having the lowest weight in the game. Plus, gifts like Bridge to Glory can somewhat make up for its potato damage by granting a flat increase to damage based on your light gift scaling. Oh, and despite what it looks like, the elemental buffs do stack. Easy peasy. But due to inconsistencies regarding how much damage enemies can take before staggering and how punishing any mistake is, a first-time player will probably try this thing out and stick to it because it's so effective and easy to use. Seriously, this thing will consistently stagger or knock down most enemies with its running or thrusting attack, whereas lighter weapons, such as one-handed swords and bayonets, will require multiple hits. It even has extremely high defenses, meaning that you can almost completely nullify incoming damage by blocking. Whoever says that size doesn't matter has never tried wielding an oversized sword. But while I'm saying that this is what newcomers will do, I don't have the perspective of one anymore. I certainly felt like a headless chicken back in 2019, but now that I've played through the game multiple times, I know what's coming and I know most of the gotcha moments. I said most. Like other games of its kind, Code Vein's level design does a lot of cheeky stuff, like having enemies that do literally nothing except wait specifically for you and only you to arrive, so they can ambush you from around the corner. Now that's some quality world building. The question is, was the game always this good? Is it because the updates have made it better? Or is it because my prior experience means that I know how to avoid the game's annoyances? Experience and knowledge can compensate for a game's shortcomings, like the final boss being straight up ass because of the camera, or Anime Rondo being so much easier when you know how to navigate that shit pile of copy-pasted level design. And with every playthrough, the game feels shorter. I can attest that my third playthrough felt like I skipped something, but I didn't. It's just that I naturally make less mistakes now than I did before. If you're playing for the first time, chances are that you'll approach combat more carefully. You'll employ tactics like drawing out enemies from a distance to avoid entire groups chasing you down. You won't be too aggressive to avoid making mistakes, and you won't bother with parrying because the timing is strict. All of this extends your playtime. The game also throws Butterfly of Delirium of all things as the second boss, which is going to filter a lot of newbies right away. And then late game you have Pornstein and Pyro, a frequent example of banging your head against a wall until you get to grips with it. Sure, you can make the argument that specific gift combinations are overpowered because they kill bosses in seconds. But that just speaks to how flexible the system is, rather than judging the game to be super easy because there's one specific way to cheese everything, especially if you figure it out for yourself instead of just looking it up online. I normally don't go in depth about difficulty unless it's so easy or so hard that it impacts the experience. And even then it can be a lost cause, because it's so dependent on the player's own abilities. There are games that people say are easy but that I struggle with. Sometimes it's the opposite, where I find a game easy but someone new to the series or the genre might have trouble with it. What I said about writing also applies to gameplay. There will be things that I miss or that I initially think are good strategies but fall off on a higher level of play. Sometimes it's the opposite, where something that I think is useless suddenly becomes useful once I give it a proper shot. How skilled does one have to be at a game to properly review it? Is one playthrough enough, since that means they'll be on the same playing field as first-timers? Or are multiple playthroughs and extensive knowledge necessary so that the reviewer can provide an all-encompassing overview of the game and all it has to offer? Who knows? So, about that DLC. You've got 3 pieces: Hellfire Knight, Frozen Empress, and Lord of Thunder. These are an extension of the depths found in the base game, which are short maps with a few paths and a locked door that requires finding some keys. Each of the 3 DLC maps also include a new boss and a number of challenges you can do for a handful of cool treasures and a whole bunch of useless tripe that only serves to pad the list. They also come with new codes, as well as the Asclepius vestiges that actually have some story. Pretty ballsy to spread those across €30 worth of DLC. At least the bosses are all fun, with the Hellfire Knight being a highlight. This is peak Code Vein combat, testing your reflexes and quick thinking, and it can be mastered with enough practice. Frozen Empress is alright but slightly gimmicky, while Lord of Thunder is almost great but suffers from camera issues. Though it has to be mentioned that they're all reskinned enemies from the God Eater games. And while there is plausible deniability for that, there's also the real possibility that recycling those animations was easier and cheaper. The maps themselves are also really short, and you can explore the entire things in 20, maybe 30 minutes. Sure, they look pretty as balls, but there just isn't much to do besides fighting the bosses over and over to complete the challenges, so you can earn 100 JPEGs that you never use. Before ending the video, I'd just like to touch on the PC port, which is functional but suboptimal. Its GPU demands are fairly light, and there's a decent amount of options to scale down for weaker hardware, and it supports high frame rates up to 240 FPS. I think that's enough. There's no native ultra-wide support, but that's hardly its biggest problem. Code Vein runs on Unreal Engine 4, and if you've been paying attention to the discourse surrounding this engine recently, then allow me to remind you that time is a flat circle. This is one of those games that choke your CPU by dumping all logic on a single thread, which probably explains the frame time spikes whenever you perform a drain attack. I'm sure this can be brute forced with a better CPU, but curiously, they also disappear if I throw DXVK at the game. Always a good sign. The game also has very aggressive asset streaming, meaning that you might see texture popping and plenty of micro stuttering. You can alleviate this by modifying the config files and by installing the game on an SSD, which is also recommended to cut down on the loading times. It's the eternal PC gaming dichotomy. The more capable the hardware gets, the shittier the ports become. May our frame times be uneven and our core counts underutilized. Oh, and you can't get the Harbinger blood code and the God Eater weapons on PC without mods, because screw you, I guess. But hey, don't let that stop you from trying out Code Vein. It's on sale like every other week, and CPU issues aside, it's not terribly demanding, so even lower-end PCs can handle it alright. I first played the game back in 2019 and thought it was decent but could use some refinements. I didn't touch it again until Christmas of 2020, when I casually felt like playing through it again and checking out the DLC. Sometimes it takes a second round for a game to really click with the player. The story, the music, the gameplay. Everything was better than I gave it credit for back in 2019. At that point, either the updates had significantly improved the game, or I couldn't fully appreciate what it had to offer because I was too salty about getting schlonged by some of the bosses. This video is already a giant train wreck, and I don't know what else to say here because I've been writing this script on and off for a very long time. And in that period, I've changed as a person and as a YouTuber. The result is that it has mutated into a cluster truck of opinions about playing games, talking about games, and me thinking too much about the emotions I experience with them, while unnecessarily trying to justify them. If you had the patience to stick this far, at this point I guess all I can say is to check the game out if anything here interested you. It's a stupid edgy looking game with a laundry list of issues. But it's fun and I'm already getting the itch to play through it yet again. To bask in that sense of style that aged like wine. You could even call it Code Vein.